I'm Will Hedrick.
And I'm Jordan Schaffer.
And this is Dog Ears and Timestamps, a movie podcast.
No sleep.
We're doing it again, a movie episode.
We're back. No sleep.
No sleep, yeah.
This is one of those r/no sleeps. So if you're trying to go to bed, don't listen to this podcast because you'll stay up all night.
It's going to be creepy.
It'll be so creepy.
Right. Now, we're this episode as... if for some reason you didn't listen to last week's episode or this is your first time listening at all, we're talking about Dr. Sleep, the new movie based on a Stephen King novel.
Yeah, and the fun thing Will talked about last week about it is just that it's based on a novel, but it's the novel that it's based on was written based on the movie that the original novel was. You know what I mean? So like
it's a couple of layers or a couple of levels removed from the original thing that it is inherently tied to.
Yeah, the original intent. There probably wouldn't have been a Dr. Sleep had there not been The Shining, the movie, So
right.
That is really interesting, and I didn't know that until you said it yesterday going in, or a weekend yesterday ago. When we saw the movie.
It's an interesting situation that this bit of media exists in.
It's also, it kind of makes me feel like Stephen King would be like a chill hang. No, he'd be cool just because he doesn't think so highly of himself. Like, I made The Shining. Like, there's only one The Shining, and it's going to be my novel. Well, he certainly
did in 1980,
right? But he's grown as a person, and he was ready to admit when he was wrong, or that he could make a lot of money doing this, whatever the case was.
Whatever it is, who knows?
But yeah, I mean, in that regard, he'd probably be a chill hang because he would it seems like he has some self-awareness where he's not just like, I'm 100% right. Even though it is my work, he was willing to let other people take it and grow with their adaptations, which is super hard to do. I get so into my original ideas. It's hard to think of like changing it or tweaking it even just to make it work. I'm like, no, this is how I have it envisioned, and it's like you can't get married to those ideas right off the bat.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he's super just like adaptive chameleon mode. Like I think we ended up seeing the movie with Kenneth, and I ended up watching The Shining the night before. So I hadn't seen The Shining as a kid, or years ago even, like not even as an adult. It was just right before seeing the movie, and then this movie just came out, and I don't know what I had in my head for The Shining, but I just had it as, I knew it was like under the horror genre of film, but in my mind, I guess it was more of like a jump scare filled kind of spook fest kind of thing. It wasn't like a...
Well, the images that are popular and that are around everywhere, if that's your only experience with the movie, would absolutely lend to that assumption. Yeah. Because it's the fountain Johnny. Of the river of blood coming out from behind the doors. Oh, yeah. It's Jack Nicholson breaking through the door with an axe and saying, "Here's Johnny." The lasting images that make it out into pop culture are, would definitely lead someone to believe that it's all jump scary, or not all jump scary, but very heavily jump scary, and kind of more of a horror in that sense, rather than the Kubrick masterpiece that it actually is.
Oh yeah, and I feel like that movie holds up still really well too. Like having not seen it before, so I don't really have comparison. I guess if it holds up, like if it was amazing back in the 80s, mind-blowingly good, and now it's just good by comparison. I don't know if that's the case, but you can tell. Like, I think we talked about it after seeing No Sleep. Dr. Sleep. Sorry, Dr. No Sleep. No Sleep. After seeing Dr. Sleep, is just that Jack Nicholson was like, you could tell like why he was a ladies' man, like he was handsome and charismatic, and there were certain scenes that it was like, hey, there he is, like there's the guy, because I only kind of know him as old Jack Nicholson, unfortunately, and
right, yeah, certainly in our lifetimes, even if we, I don't know off the top of my head what movie may have come out in like 95 or something when we might have been cognizant, and been able to be like, I know who this person is in this movie I have seen. So I don't know what to compare it to, but even then he would have been
Batman. He was in Batman. He was the
That's true.
Penguin,
he was
right?
No, that was Danny DeVito.
Danny DeVito.
But he was the Joker in Batman movie. I can't remember which one it is. It might have been the really bad one, but I can't remember. Batman and Robin, the movie was awful. I don't think it was Batman and Robin. Whatever. But Yeah, he's just maybe the greatest actor of that generation. If not the obviously because you can have an opinion, but he would be certainly in the top 5.
And Stanley Kubrick is a director,
Mm-hmm.
well-known director.
Also has directed other. I don't know that he's directed a movie that's not insanely well known. 2001: A Space Odyssey, Eyes Wide Shut. There's going to be other like quintessential movies directed by him that I can't remember right now and should be ashamed of. But yeah, and they're all like out there.
Yeah.
Like absolutely crazy. Eyes Wide Shut is one of the most insane things that I've ever seen.
Yeah, I'll definitely have to watch it because I couldn't tell if this was like just a 1980s movie, and maybe that was some of the vibe that I was getting, just like dialogue being different because of the time, and or how much was his directorial liberties taken, like how much, because there were lots of long scenes that it was just like, we're looking at the hotel now, and we're just sitting here staring at it, and we're
certainly in The Shining, it's like that's like a tool that they're using to build up a sense of dread.
Oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Because
I just didn't know if that was maybe a popular thing back in the 80s. They just had long scenes of just still shots. Because even when we watched Salem's Lot, I felt like there were a lot of those kinds of scenes. But that was an older
There's also
movie too.
a Stephen King horror film, So
yeah, I know.
And that one came out in the 70s, right?
I think so.
I think it was 74, if I remember correctly. So before The Shining. But yeah, that's definitely a tool of like building suspense and dread. Is like, let's watch him walk down the entire hallway, and certainly back whenever they didn't have all the capability for effects to be able to then have like a ghost be there. It's like, how do we make it more scary? Is that we make you experience the trip to the point of the scare,
Yeah, and I'm also I would guess that filmmaking is probably completely different too, based on just like the editing process. Like you can't just take that to the editor's room, like I've heard tons of stories where actors or people that are acting that day, they talk about just like how it didn't feel like you got it in that, like, but then it's like, yeah, we can take it to the chopping block or the editing room and we can make it into what it needs to be there. It's just it's interesting. The obvious development of the medium and like the art itself is just, it's interesting to see how it's done. It's just it's simple things that I doubt directors are really even thinking about that much, and probably Kubrick wasn't even thinking. He didn't direct this one, did he? Dr.
Kubrick's dead.
Oh, he's dead. Okay, so he can't comment, but
he died in 99. Not too long. That's the same year that Eyes Wide Shut came out.
Oh, okay.
So that was his last thing that he did. I decided to look up a list just so like my dad doesn't like write me an email saying, how could you forget these movies? At least as far as like the really big ones that he did. He also did Spartacus, the original Spartacus. Okay. Lolita, Doctor Strangelove, A Clockwork Orange, which should have been the one that I remembered first.
Yeah, Lolita. That's
Full
funny.
Metal Jacket as well. Okay. So those are examples of the mind of Stanley Kubrick.
Yeah, I never realized Lolita was a movie. I knew it was the book, but didn't realize.
I don't know if his movie was based on the book, or I don't know what that relation is. I haven't actually seen that movie. I just know about it. But
based on the book, it feels right up the alley. Not that I know his other works, but I could see the outlandishness of the story, being something that drew him in, because that's what's made me consider reading the book, is just like how foreign it is and how you empathize with a pedophile, and you end up kind of rooting for them, like Dexter, how you're
rooting for a serial killer.
Exactly.
Yes.
and Breaking Bad, it's like you definitively know who the good guy and the bad guys are. Yeah. His brother-in-law, the cop, is the good guy, and we're all rooting for him to die. Yeah, we all want him to die.
Him and his fucking stones, or his gem. What is he? His minerals, or what is it? They're minerals.
Yeah, that's so funny. Yeah, it's just like we just wanted them to die, and it was just like, man, I'm rooting for this.
Right. It's interesting, like character study kind of stuff.
And I wonder why it's so easy to empathize and relate? Like, is it just well done, or do we all have this darkness maybe that it's fun to kind of open the window to?
It requires a willingness to look at it that way.
Okay.
Because there's definitely people who would refuse to entertain the thought and therefore would be unable to.
Yeah, and there are tons of people who don't like Dexter or that kind, or or a lot of this, or this kind of darker wave of
not
things.
Not because it's dark, but just because I don't care about any of the characters in that show.
I get that too. Yeah, for sure.
I watched like the first season, and I was just like, I just really don't give a shit about any of these people. But anyways, But yeah, so that's all, Kubrick stuff, and what he did with The Shining is incredible. I haven't read the book. I know you haven't read the book either, so I don't know what the difference. I don't literally know firsthand what the difference is and why Stephen King didn't like it whenever it came out. But what I have read and been told is that it makes a focus on the literal shining that exists in the story, which is Danny Torrance's a sort of psychic ability.
Yeah.
It's not like outright said. It's a psychic ability in the book because King is more ambiguous than that.
Yeah.
He doesn't lay down hard rules of this is how magic works and stuff like that,
Yeah, I imagine it being some sort of thing that like they talked about and they all kind of knew Danny could do because of his imaginary friend.
But the movie...
Oh, that wasn't even the book. So yeah, I can imagine it would be something that maybe they knew he could do, just like how, like... We all know I can roll my tongue, but like, we don't talk about that.
But it's not a plot point. Or
but at the end of my Stephen King book, it'd be like, you roll your tongue to get out of the dungeon because that's what the troll master needed because or whatever. Like,
right. That was the troll's toll.
Yeah. Can you roll your tongue?
But the Kubrick movie puts more of an emphasis on Danny's shining.
Yeah.
And as well as, the head chef who connects with him because of the shining, because he also has the shining, whatever the psychic ability is. And Kubrick was like, that's not King was like, that wasn't the point of the book. The book was something completely different, and you're putting a focus on it. And that's why he resented the film whenever it came out. And has obviously since come around, wrote Dr. Sleep, which published in 2013, based on the idea that now Kubrick's film is the canon of The Shining and not his original work.
I wonder if that took Kubrick passing for King to look at it objectively.
That's still 12 years, no, longer than that, 14 years later, because Kubrick passed in 99 and Dr. Sleep published in 2013.
That's what I was thinking though. It's still like...
But King cranks that shit out, so he probably was, not probably, but I would imagine that maybe he started writing it like maybe in 2009 or something like that at the earliest.
But after, but...
Well, yeah. But like a 10-year period for him to sort of come around to it.
I guess it just in my head, I see him writing so many like rough drafts and manuscripts and stuff. I could see him maybe writing.
There's probably always 1,000 ideas that he's got, right? And what is on the agenda for this year.
And does he actually write them all down, or are they just floating around in his noodle?
Yeah.
That's a good point too. I didn't even think about that. Yeah, because we have thousands of ideas just for random crap.
I used to keep not a literal notepad, but a notepad on my phone of ideas that I had.
I do that still. I make a to-do list of things.
I think I still have it on. I might have gotten rid of it because I realized that most of them were trash.
I write down jokes in there. I've got a lot of weird jokes that I thought were funny at the time, and sometimes they're still funny.
But so that's the sort of the background so far as we know it, leading up to this movie.
Yeah,
the idea is that, The Shining is more of a thing. How do we then make that a narrative going forward?
Right.
It's Danny Torrance's life after that. And what we figured when we were talking about it afterwards was that there's probably, in the book, there's probably a whole, 200 pages talking about Danny's life up until the events of this movie, and the way that there's always much more description in King movies or novels than the movie, because otherwise we'd have an 8-hour movie.
Yeah.
Because the movie pretty much we get a very quick, just this is kind of what happened to Danny Torrance afterwards, and he figures out how to box up the demons, and then boom, it's 2011 or whatever it was.
Yeah, it was 2011.
Yeah, and here's where he is at now. He's an alcoholic, and he's figuring his way out, and he finds himself in a small town where he finds recovery and meaning. But then there's also this little girl who has the shining, and they connect somehow.
Do you think that his friend had the shining a little bit?
That's what I felt like we were being led to believe for a second.
Yeah.
But then, when it became evident that, he understood who Danny was because of alcoholism, because he himself was a recovering alcoholic.
That was okay.
That's what he meant by like, I know that look is because that was me, you know?
Yeah, because they ended up explaining how the shine doesn't surface in some people nearly as brightly.
But a lot of people have The Shining, but maybe never know it. It's small things like you, like I guess you're better, like, you know, you happen to bring roses home one day, and
like that one.
just because you didn't know it, but that also happens to be the day that your wife's having a really bad day, or you know, things.
Yeah, you didn't study for the test, but you somehow do really well, and it's just like it almost sounded like it could be confused with intuition. As well as
that would be like
shining.
Society's understanding of it, an explanation of it. You know, it's just like, well, you know, he just has good intuition or whatever. But so that's how we get to the point of this movie is it very quickly blowing through all that stuff that probably takes 200 pages in the actual book.
Yeah, because it feels like he handles his problems in kind of like the most unhealthy way possible by like bottling them up until they explode.
Well, he's like literally trapping them. Like, and then that's another thing is that there's no hard rules in this story.
Right, yeah.
We don't know, like, we know kind of what the magic is and that it's like kind of a psychic ability, but whatever, maybe not like in conventional terms.
Yeah, and we don't know what that limits itself to.
But
like,
these ghosts are coming, they're following him, and so he learns how to trap them with the help of the head chef that still visits him from the afterlife. And so that's what, he captures the demons, but then he also just becomes an alcoholic because I think he's trying to block The Shining because it's still affecting him, or whatever.
Yeah, just like the rough edges of the power of Shining, it made it not hard to figure anything out, but it's just like there were no set rules. You didn't know, they
because there's no like wizard that shows up and says, "Here's how you deal with it, Danny."
Well, and we don't know if Danny can do everything everybody else can do, or if because it seems like we end up meeting like this cult of people, and it seems like they all have a different character trait.
They seem to have like particular abilities
Like we meet this one girl who's a 15-year-old girl, and she's what they call like a pusher. So she like influences people by giving them a little nudge of influence. So what her what her thing was that she would she'd prey on pedophiles, so prey on the hunter or whatever. And then she would leave
steal their money, but then also ruin their lives by leaving them marked and stuff like that or whatever.
But she would tell them like, go to sleep. You want to go to sleep, whatever her exact phrasing was, but she said like, you want to go to sleep, and then they're like, yeah, and then they go to bed.
But she's the only one, at least of that group, that we get any indication that she has a special ability.
But that was the introduction of The Shining to us, so I thought it was interesting in the fact that like we're getting so many different levels of what this power is. But you're right, we don't know who can do what. If the main
because
girl
the main one, Rose, seems to just be really powerful because she's been doing it a long time.
Yeah, and she just,
but she doesn't have a set skill set that we're being like, because like the girl that the little blonde girl that they turn into towards the beginning is a pusher, and then Rose describes Abra, the girl on the good side, as a looker.
And she's still diagnosing what she is too. She doesn't know because she calls herself a looker because she's looking on to other people. I thought she did at least.
It seemed like she had that ability, but like what we're saying is that there's no clear defined rules as to how any of this works in this universe.
Yeah,
and I think that's good.
Oh yeah, it was very cool. It leaves a lot of room for us to do stuff like this. Just talk about it, like, because could she push? I'm pretty sure she could. I think she did push someone at one point too. I just can't bring it to mind.
Not that I remember. Or
maybe it was just when she was.
Is The Shining just like a well of power that you have, and you have a propensity to use it in a certain way, and theoretically you could use the other techniques if you learned them?
The only limit is your imagination.
Right.
I love powers like that, though. Not to be all corny and dorky, but like those are the best when it's just like hard work and imagination, and you can do it all.
But I really like this movie. I thought that it was super awesome. It's like really high action in a way that a majority of King-based movies aren't.
Yeah, I was worried too. Just like,
granted, it's a King movie coming out in 2019.
Yeah, I mean, but that being said, too, it's 2019. I'm used to everybody complaining about the length of things being an issue, and this was a 2.5-hour movie, maybe a little less, but
it was 2 hours and 40 minutes.
Well, a little more. So I was thinking for sure, I'm renowned for falling asleep in movies. I thought for sure I'd knock out at one point, or I'd lose focus, or my mind would wander. And very rarely do I feel like I go through a whole movie with very little expectations. Yeah. Not only in one sitting, yeah, that's a great point, but with really good focus too. Like my mind didn't wander much at all during the movie, and the same thing happened during The Shining too. Like it didn't wander, but it's two sittings. Yeah, but and that's why I took it in. But it also
was really long. I think that's like 2 hours and 50 minutes.
And I wanted to, like, as I was watching The Shining too, I was trying to make sure like I gave it its full attention so I could see maybe whatever parallels they might have between the two movies. And really, the big one I saw, just like cinematography wise, when Danny was going into his interview for his job that like kind of is the catalyst to change his future.
Yeah, when he gets the job as the orderly.
Exactly, as the orderly, thank you. And what is an orderly? I didn't know what that was.
An orderly is just like an employee of generally speaking, of some sort of medical institution, whether it's a hospital or a hospice, like he is working at, where they just do like the grunt work. They keep the place clean.
And you don't have to.
Maybe they do the administrative things. It is they're not nothing medical.
Nurses?
No.
Okay, I didn't.
Not at all.
For some reason I had orderly.
They
and
keep
nurse.
things in order.
Okay,
you might say.
There you go. Okay, I like that. That makes it easy to remember. So yeah, he gets the job as the orderly, and but it was
the interview,
it was a parallel moment in that interview where it was like, this is the catalyst
the guy
for the
sitting
movie.
across
this
the desk,
is changing.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, it felt like it was filmed in the same room, even though it probably wasn't. Obviously,
yeah.
They're
definitely trying to let it be a bit of a reference,
and not just a big in your face reference like, here's Johnny when he because he pokes his head through the door and he doesn't do the crazy look
for the climax. There's but I think that there's also a theme, and who knows if it happens this way in the book or not, but there is a theme of Danny finding closure with Jack.
That was cool, yeah.
And the first time that they acknowledge that, at least outwardly, is whenever he's giving his 8-year sober speech at the AA meeting, and he's talking about like I found my dad by being an alcoholic, even though he died when I was 5, but now I get to find my dad as being sober, which I knew was something he wanted to do, and so I was like, okay, so we're getting a parallel of having closure with what happened with you and your father when you were 5 and he tried to murder you, and then whenever they go back to the Overlook for the final climax to finish off, Rose, he goes and has, like a conversation with the ghost of his dad as presented by the evil of the hotel. And, he refuses a drink one last time, but then also gets to talk to, his dad and have like closure with that, which is good because then he dies.
Yeah. And it shows his growth as a character too, because he wanted that. Like he wanted to drink, but then he's like, he knew that he was better from it, or whatever happened. There was some struggle where he was like, he knew it would be just the wrong path to go down if he started drinking.
It would bring him backwards, and it would probably take away the strength needed to finish this fight, Yeah,
and he had people that counted on him and needed him, Abra needed him, and I thought it was, I mean, obviously I want people to go see it, but I want to tell them everything. I mean, I feel like we've already kind of told almost the whole movie.
Yeah, but, there's a lot plot-wise that we haven't talked about that we don't need to talk about. But just like implementation-wise, like just everything was really good. Ewan McGregor is great in everything, and of course he's great in this.
Yeah, that's a good point.
The girl Abra I thought was really good.
I did too.
For a child actress, she was believable. Even just like in her mannerisms, I think that sold really well. She had a very
genuine smile that every time it came through, like her eyes crinkled up, and she smiled with her whole face, and you could see all of her pearly whites. It's just like that girl is literally happy right now. I think like it's not an actress. Like that's a happy little girl, and she was great. She was good.
I thought the villains were good.
I do too. Kenneth and I talked about a little bit how it felt like they had a little bit to be desired in maybe the power department, but we were just talking about how the ambiguity of their power and there was a cool element. So maybe if I gave it a rewatch, they'd come off a little more threatening because we don't know the extent of their power.
Because they're just we call them vampires because that's the only like or at least not the only, but the easiest monster to relate them to, because they're sucking up life force and killing you by doing so.
Yeah.
And but aside from that, that's the only thing that's supernatural about them, is that they're cognizant of this magical thing that some people have. They can harness it to whatever degrees are, because we don't see, the only ones that we see use any power is Rose and the 15-year-old that they turn early on. We don't see any of the other ones use their power at all.
Yeah.
Even Crow, who we get a little bit of alone time with, we never see him use his power in any way.
I kind of wanted to see what he'd be like a specialist in.
But I think maybe we get more details in the book, but because it is a movie and it's already at 2 hours and 47 minutes, it's, they
how many more things can they introduce?
We can't give each of the villains their own time to showcase their power,
Yeah.
But like you were saying, it is ambiguous what their power is, but then at the same time, they're just literally taking life force from somebody to extend their lives. A lot of them have been along for a long time. The old one who dies outside of action is given to have been around for a couple of millennia or something, based on the speech that Rose was giving him to help ease his passing. So they're literally just like stringing along a dying corporeal form on the sustenance of a fading thing. Like, they haven't been eating well for the past couple of years at the point of the story really taking off. So like where you and Kenneth said, like, we never felt like they were menacing or that they were a threat. I was like, I don't think that
maybe
we shouldn't have been, because they're preying on children and children exclusively, so they don't have to be very threatening to take out a child.
Yeah, but even for whatever reason, just, I mean, saying they're preying on a child to me comes off like almost extra scary, even though it doesn't require
it's horrific, but it doesn't
require any extra.
The strength
muscle
level doesn't have to be there to
right.
be able to do so.
Right.
No, we're not fighting Dracula.
You're right. I think maybe it's just a morality thing that I have with it.
And it's horrific.
That's why, it's very horrific for sure. And what makes the Shine like more pure is fear, and screaming. I don't think it's screaming, but it was fear, and it is weird how like you're going through like how their power, like what we did know, and they're just fully focused on the shine in people, and it's like they could like, it was hard. I don't know why
it's like a supernatural version of living paycheck to paycheck. They are literally existing just to continue existing. They obviously get some joy out of what they do to continue existing, but it's not like they have like a career they're working on. They're not in power, so they don't get like, the high of ruling over people or whatever, They're literally just like, we got to find the next thing so that we can continue.
But and when that's their purpose or your job or your that's got to be not like the best, not a very sweet life. Everything revolved around like the like, I keep wanting to call it a mist, but it was they said
they
it was
called
a
it
shine,
steam.
Or steam.
The vampires called it steam, which I guess is something that the way that what they've been calling it as long as they've been around, or since it was introduced to them by whoever recruited them into the group. Whereas the only reason we call it The Shining is because that's what Danny was told it was called by the head cook, who was told by his grandmother, who had it as well. Yeah. So where did she get it from? Did she just realize she had it? No one told her about it, and that's just what she then called it, or whatever, In the same way that, different cultures in the real world have different names for the same thing, but because they weren't told about it by the other culture, that's why they have a unique name for it, and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, and even a grandma of 2019 versus a grandma of 1980 might have a different nickname for the cute little thing that they figured out. You know what I mean? Like, she called it The Shining, but how often have you ever heard anybody talk about somebody really shining? You know what I mean? Like, that person, they really shone so brightly. That's what I meant by that. Thank you. That's what I wanted to say. It's just a dated phrase, so you'd think, maybe that's also why it was. But they were even older, so.
But they seem to call it steam because the physical manifestation that came out of you as you were dying looks like smoke.
Yeah.
You know?
It was kind of weird that they sucked out the steam, or tried to like suck up the steam of the people that had passed, you know, like as when they died, they're just like let's suck up every little drop of steam. It just seems like, aren't they out of it? I thought they were out of steam, and that's why they couldn't keep.
Well, they're starving, so they're ravenous because they don't have that much. And so, like, if you didn't eat for a week, and then somebody was suddenly like, "All right, here's a whole turkey that you got to make last for another week," you'd probably eat like a quarter of it right then, and then be like, "Okay, I need to save the rest of it," you know.
But the way I was thinking is that it was like a turkey bones, you know, like it was just like because it was all the meat was off of that old man, basically, metaphorically, you know what I mean? Like all the smoke was out of him, or the steam was out of him. I think
what they suck up of him when he passes is what was his originally.
Oh, okay, I could see that.
Is my assumption. They obviously don't explain that in any way, but that seems to be the only thing that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Because if he was, why would he waste away and then have something to give, except that you give up. Whenever you die, you give up what was originally yours.
Yeah,
because he had lived far past the time that his literal corporeal form could handle if he had been around for a couple millennia. So what was sustaining him was the rejuvenation of other people's things, and then when that ran out, then his final his core could be released.
Then he used his. Okay, I could. Yeah. I never really, I guess, thought about that too much during the movie because Abra has like an enormous vat of
given
energy.
To be extremely powerful,
but that doesn't mean that she's going to live for that long.
No, because she's not. She's got her own. That's her core.
That's her,
or whatever. Yeah, and she's going to live as long as a regular human does, unless she decides to start doing this thing.
Yeah. So I mean, it makes sense that even after he used that old man used up all his steam from all the other hosts that he had stolen from. It does make sense that would be his last little reservoir of his own original steam. But
it's his soul. But he was living off of the souls of others, and then when he ran out of those, he died. And so then you can't live off of your own soul.
You think the fear he had when he said he was scared to die? No, because then she talked him out of it. I was gonna say, you think the fear that he had was like purified his steam, but then she talked him out of being scared.
Yeah.
Or at least we are kind of led to believe that she talks him through it, so he's not as scared. So he might still be scared, but yeah, I liked the pullbacks between like 1980 and now, because it felt like the Overlook Hotel, like obviously the real location that they filmed at, they didn't just let it sit for since the 80s,
right?
But they rebuilt the set or rebuilt something to make it look like
they wanted to let it be as one-to-one as possible. It's because all of that imagery is so iconic that if you fuck it up, then you're bringing down your own project.
Oh yeah, and nobody will let that go.
I mean, they had like the pots in the hallway were like the exact same thing. I mean, I caught that immediately just because when I was watching The Shining Saturday night, I was like, those are such 70s pots, man. They just caught my eye watching The Shining, and then to see them. So then they immediately caught my eye in Dr. Sleep because they were like exactly the same. I was like, man, that's perfect detail.
That was really cool to see in Dr. Sleep. Just that, like, even room 237 was still super 80s, like, and modern for 80s, but obviously old for now. And
right, they definitely put an extreme amount of effort into recreating it as close as possible, which I think like you have to if you're gonna try to evoke something as iconic as The Shining. You gotta fucking do it, you know.
And I feel like they definitely spared no expense, not only with Ewan McGregor being like an all-star actor, but that attention to detail, that couldn't have been easy. And they weren't thinking of that when they made The Shining. They weren't thinking this is going to be such an iconic masterpiece.
Right. They're like, this is just a swanky ass 70s hotel.
Let's get some plants that'll last or something, like you're right. It's just a swanky ass hotel that was just like, it is modernized for 1980. And that's another thing that, I'll probably always bring up when we're talking about Stephen King and it being a certain time period that he's writing in. He always writes about like the current, and it's fun taking a step back into history because him writing always on the current era, will lead us to, reading Dr. Sleep would be written relatively recently. So it was probably written in 2016, like as if it was in 2016 or whenever the book was written. I don't know if it came out this year.
He published it in 2013.
Oh, okay. So it's probably written as though it was in 2013 when it happened, even though the movie came out and it was 2011 when.
Whenever we cut to modern times, but then 8 years of sobriety,
right?
The movie ends in 2019.
Yeah, which is fun because like it draws back to the thing that I was just saying. Like he's always going for the current modern time, which there's something to that you can't. That's really hard to recreate. Like it's. I was talking about Jack Nicholson after the movie with you and Kenneth. Just how I was trying to look up just the paparazzi culture of Jack Nicholson. Like, was he a big party animal? Was he a big, just like the stereotypical? What was his lifestyle exactly? And we have our pop culture things now. Like I have my own preconceived notions of Britney Spears or Paris Hilton or whatever. But I don't have anything for Jack Nicholson. So, going back and trying to figure that out, it was tough. And there is something inherently in all these movies and books that's just like, because it was written in that year for that year, just like not standalone, obviously, but for that particular moment, to me, there's something special in that, just that it's a very authentic version of that exact year and that time period and the even the vibe of society that's going on. You can kind of get it a little bit. It's just that I think they did a good job on that too. And I don't know if it's as important to anybody else, but it does feel like it's an element in a lot of books or in a lot of movies. So to see that other people are noticing it and making it an important feature for their particular work does. It doesn't go unnoticed, I guess. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I think that it does. It lends an authenticity to what's being, not just the story that's being told, but the environment that the story exists in.
Yeah, it'll be cool too in 20 years or whatever to look back on this and be like, oh, okay, look at that, like 2019.
What a year!
Yeah, what a year.
I don't know that I have much else to say about it.
I don't know if I do either. I would definitely recommend both. I'd say The Shining.
If you haven't seen The Shining, why?
Yeah, there really wasn't a reason that I hadn't. I definitely thought it'd be scarier, but it was, it was creepy and it was everything I wanted. So.
I saw it like way too young. My dad had me watch it when I was like 12 or something like that, and I've watched it a few times, in the years since, like maybe every like 4 or 5 years or something, just either it'll just be on or someone wants to watch it or whatever. And every time I'm like, I shouldn't have watched this when I was 12. But whatever. If you haven't seen The Shining, why? Even if you're 12, watch it.
Watch it.
And then go see Dr. Sleep because it's really good.
Yeah.
I think it's super awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I've got small little petty complaints that only affect me, like when I complain about audiobook narrators or whatever. It's just every now and then I got pulled out of it because they couldn't use the actors from the 80s because 40 years later. Like
they had to have a different person play both Danny in boy form and Winifred, his mom, and then whenever he's having the conversation with his dad, Jack, at the Overlook Hotel, it's a different actor because
Jack Nicholson's not in it.
Which is like, yeah, exactly. Like they could have had actual Jack Nicholson in there and do like some de-aging technique stuff, like they've done with other movies and other actors, but
even CGI.
That stuff doesn't age well.
No, it doesn't. You're right.
In 15 years, if they had done that, we would watch this movie and be like, oh god, that looks awful. Yeah, and I would prefer them to do like as they did, just get people that look similar enough.
Yeah, it really, I think it was
just so that we know, like, okay, well that's Winifred Torrance.
Yeah,
duh.
I think it was just me that had the issue with it. Like, it's not like people wrote in like this is a crap movie because because they didn't have.
It's something that you notice, like you said, because it's not them. But I would. It's something that we're like, okay, well, it looks like them. We know who that's supposed to be.
Yeah, I know what you're doing.
So here we are. I'm bought in because what choice did you have?
Yeah, it's just I was so just in my own lane on that one that like when the Jack Nicholson stand-in came in, I was just like, who are we talking to? Like, and why does it matter? Like, who's this guy with a receding hairline that's, and then he said something like dad or whatever. And I was like, oh, okay, I should have figured that out a while ago.
Before they get away from just his hands and then show, the actor that's supposed to be him and that we're supposed to, just go ahead and buy in that it's him. He does, Danny does make a reference to, he's like, something about our family, and then bartender who turns out to be Jack says, I think you have me mistaken for somebody, Danny, or something like that.
Yeah.
And so like it's given to us before they show us his face.
Yeah.
But I mean,
I was so bought
there's
into
definitely people who might miss that.
Yeah, I was bought into my own lane that I was like, oh, he must be talking about just people at the hotel, or like I made it something else so quickly that I was like, he's talking about alcoholics, or the people of the hotel, or not his literal family talking to his dad. But that was obviously the case. It was it was I mean, for that being my complaint, like, that's nothing,
right?
Like, and it shouldn't take you out of the movie at all. I don't think. I let it, but if I watched it again, it wouldn't. And I think you're exactly right. They did it because those other methods don't hold up well against the test of time. And I think that just having a similar lookalike character with a badass story will withstand the time, the timetables. But I think it'll age pretty well. Who knows if it'll age nearly as well as The Shining, because how did they know that was going to age so well? They did a good job on that. Like,
The Shining is like 100% practical effect as well.
What does that mean?
There's no, it being in 1980, there couldn't have been CGI.
Oh, okay.
Like everything in that film was done practically. And so that's, why it holds. That's why the Lord of the Rings trilogy, the original trilogy, not that shit Hobbit stuff, it ages extremely well. If you go back and watch that, you can see where there is CGI in bits and pieces and be like, well, now I can see it. It doesn't look as good as I remember, but like the vast majority of the major fights and everything is all practically done. And it all looks really good still because it's real. Yeah. Short of like they're actually being a real dwarf.
They swept the boards at the, nobody talks about them anymore, but the award show or whatever, like they swept the thing, everything they entered into, like,
with the Return of the King, the first two movies, they didn't win a whole lot.
Okay, that's what it was. It was just the Return of the King. Then that's what the board.
It was finally like, okay, the thing is completed, and now we'll give you recognition by letting you have every award. Even though you should have been deserving of it the last 6 years or however long it was. But
those were cool too. It was like back to back, year after year. The new Lord of the Rings came out, and I was like, what?
I think it might have been every like couple of years. Oh. But very close. They filmed them all at the same time so that they could do that. As opposed to it being like a 10-year difference. But yeah, in any case, that's one of the reasons The Shining holds up. Yeah. Because it still looks believable because it was real sets being done. Yeah. The blood coming out of the doorway was extremely well done, which is why I could tell that the blood coming out of the doorway in Dr. Sleep was not the exact same shot, because it's from a higher angle, and they could have only shot it one time in The Shining. Oh, they're like, we only have one chance at this fucking thing that we're doing that is absolutely unreal.
Everything is gonna be ruined. Yeah, covered in this fake blood.
And then in Dr. Sleep, when they redo it, it's from a higher angle, and so it's like, so they redid it. But of course, they redid all of those shots. One, because if they're going to do flashbacks and not have the original actors in those flashbacks, then they need to redo everything so that it does, so that visually it fits with the rest of the film. If suddenly they were to flashback and it looked different, you'd be like, what?
I think they did one of those, like, I always think of Star Wars, but like one of those like Star Wars tricks, like when it was a flashback of Jack, it was the new actor, I think.
Yeah.
So that was cool.
They didn't do any copy pastes of the literal footage.
I actually think Little Danny, they had him and Winifred do it like a recreation of an old scene from the last movie.
Because it was the same actor and actress that is in, Florida. Yeah. Or whatever, that we see them whenever, he overcomes his thing as a child, at least. So yeah, they anything that they went and flashed back to, they redid with the actors that are in this film. Which is the right way to do it, because it would be jarring to suddenly have a shot that is, filmed from 1978.
That's what I was thinking was going to be the big thing if they did do a throwback like that, just that it would be like, okay,
that would definitely bring you out of
this,
it, you know.
Yeah, they filmed this with a different camera,
right?
But yeah, they could, like we're saying, they really didn't spare any expense or have any lacking, in their attention to detail. Because yeah, that dude, I didn't even think about that blood elevator scene being a one take. Like, we better hope this freaking is a good.
We've got one shot at this ridiculous thing that we want to do.
Yeah. And I was thinking about them too, like having to follow Danny riding his little bike or whatever, and on a silent, like I was just trying to think of in the 80s, like a silent camera and a silent like rolling situation where it doesn't like make any noise, but you can still follow Danny. I guess it could have made noise and they just swap out audio maybe, but no, because we heard him rolling around, so maybe it didn't.
Yeah, because you get the difference from him going on the hardwood to the carpet to the hardwood, which
it's just,
in of itself is a very uncomfortable thing to be listening to in that situation. Is like there's so much about The Shining is just so well done, sound design wise, everything about it. I mean, that's why it's a masterpiece of horror. But yeah, this was a really good movie. I thought.
I did too.
Everything about it was great.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, my small complaints are nothing, so.
There's some really cool single shots, like whenever Rose goes to try and track down Abra and then has a confrontation with her, and Abra gets the upper hand because she's just inherently more powerful or whatever. And then Rose flies back across, half of the United States in the vision and then slams back into her own body and falls off the top of the RV. That was so laughing. Like visually perfect. I just thought that was like a really cool shot. It
was really cool, and I started laughing because it just felt like God slapped her off the top of the bus or whatever, because she flew back into her body, and that scene was a little weird for me, actually. Not that her flying back into her body, but her flying out of her body. And then like flying over the world,
over the states and like trying to pinpoint where Abra was or whatever.
I don't know how else you would visualize that. I mean, that's probably exactly how you do it, and it would look kind of Ace Ventura, a bit, but this was a serious non-Ace Ventura movie, and it and even though she was floating through the air, like it that didn't take me out of it either, obviously, but it was there wasn't any other way to shoot that, I don't think.
Right. So, unless they like kept it first person with Rose, and then it was just like literally a camera just flying over the earth, but that just conveys that we're moving location, whereas showing her flying over the earth conveys that she is searching.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And when Danny learned how to do it as well, and when Abra did it herself, actually, when they do that motion of turning the house upside down, they had taught us what that meant, I guess. I guess just the last little thing that I want to say about the movie, just because I was proud of making the reference after the movie, was that I really liked all the stuff that happened like within their minds. The reference I made was like in Naruto when they're fighting with the Sharingan.
They're doing genjutsu stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's all in their mind, and they're fighting in a dream. And that was really fun for me in this, because I felt like maybe every time but one, I was almost in the know. Like I knew it was a genjutsu, but they didn't say until
it's a really cool
evident, and I really
environment to play with. It also happens in Dreamcatcher. You remember that Stephen King movie?
I don't.
They're like in a cabin in the like in snowy Vermont or something like that. Just, some northern place where it's snowing, and then aliens come and they have to like fight off the aliens. But there's like a mind space thing that happens there because the aliens are psychic or something like that. It's the movie itself was not awesome from what I remember. I remember laughing at a lot of different things in it that came out like in 2002 or something like that. But another Mindspace example. It's just like a cool idea to have these mind spaces that you exist in, that where you get to then create the rules, and so physics gets to be different. And you get to have fun things happen in that. The very famously, Sherlock Holmes has a mind palace, and that's how he figures things out. And so,
I liked in the Sherlock Holmes movie where he was fighting, and he was like breaking down the fight as he was fighting.
Oh, the recent ones with Robert Downey Jr. Yeah,
even though that probably
really
would
cool
never
effect.
happen, but I liked that a lot because it was just like it slowed it down for us, and it felt very like
it's an interesting
Spidey
visual
sense
representation of how smart he is and his his logical pathways of thinking. It's a cool visual representation of that.
Yeah, for sure.
And then slow-mo is just always cool.
Oh yeah, yeah. They got a channel of it on YouTube.
Yeah. But I don't think I have anything else to say about the movie.
No, yeah, I got my last little Naruto thing out, so
Okay.
Yeah, I would recommend. I'm gonna, tell everybody to go see it. I want to read the books now.
The Shining is only like 300 and something pages.
Oh, okay.
Doctor Sleep's a lot longer, I think.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, The Shining always in my head because it's one of the classics. It also makes me think.
I assumed it was a long one.
The classic, yeah, like it is like 900 pages.
I never looked it up. I was just like, that must be a long one. And then I was actually talking with my manager at work about it the other day. I was saying, I'm going to go see Doctor Sleep, and he was like, yeah, that was a really good movie. I really liked that, blah, blah. And then we were talking about the books. And I was like, I just haven't read it because it's so long. And he was like, it's not long at all. It's one of his shorter ones. It's like 320 pages. And I was like, oh, okay.
Oh, easy to digest.
But yeah, Doctor Sleep is probably longer. I think that I want to read them as well, for The Shining, just to see what the difference is. Mm-hmm. If the difference is that big, or was Stephen King just being nitpicky about his work in 1980?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, because if it was as big as we made it, because we made it so big in our talk about it today that I was like, yeah, I definitely see why you might not have liked that. And that's just what
I've been like told why he resented the movie,
Yeah, I mean,
having not read the book myself, I can't attest to it in any way.
Yeah, I mean, if I made the sense of the book all about like mind battles and like handling your own inner demons, and then somebody twisted it into magic, I'd be like, dude, the story is to like, like they didn't get it at all.
Yeah, exactly.
and then
that wasn't the point.
Yeah, but once I guess he had to step outside of himself. And then realize like,
let it stew and maybe be like, oh, this is a very good version of what I was doing.
And I think you might have even said it to me when you were telling me about it originally, that like he had to look at it as sort of a standalone thing. Like this isn't my book. This is its own thing. This is
someone's interpretation of a story that I told. You know? And guess what? It's really well done.
And it's great. Yeah. And that's that I know we already said it, but that's got to be hard too to admit. Like. Admit you're wrong. I hated it, but now I like it, and now I'm gonna expand on it. So yeah.
Well, this is obviously our Thanksgiving week episode.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah, happy Thanksgiving. If you celebrate it, you may not be from America. Although, if you're one of the what did we get 12 listeners? I'm pretty sure you're all from America. So happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
As we said last week, next week we'll be continuing the book club. We're going to start the Witcher series. What we're doing just for our own personal benefit, jumping into this universe, is we're going to read the 2 prequels, which are each about 300 pages. You don't have to unless you want to. And then what we're going to do the actual episodes on is going to be on the first of the actual Witcher saga, which is a 7-book series. The first book being Blood of Elves. We're going to read the first 3 chapters. Yeah. It's about 100-ish pages. So that's what the reading assignment is the first 3 chapters of Blood of Elves, the first book in the Witcher series. And we'll see y'all next week with that. Yeah. I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, me too. I know we were talking about it in last week's episode that I don't know anything about the game, so I can't wait to hop into the story and see if I probably won't even matter too much if you know about the game or not, but I am excited to see.
The games evidently take place after the book series.
Mm-hmm. And I'm excited to see just what got everybody so into the story in the first place. Like either it was
what is this source material that has become this huge thing that it is now? Because it's a 3-game series. They're having a Netflix show that's coming out on the 20th of December.
Yeah, and so either we'll be 100% in agreement with the author, like they're ruining your story,
God,
or
we'll just such a jerk,
or we'll just hop on the bandwagon and be like, I love this source material, I can't get enough of the content. Like I'm glad that they're doing as much as they are, which I'm so much more likely to be on that bandwagon I think than any other. So yeah, I can't wait. I'm looking forward to it. Mm-hmm. In so many words, I guess.
I love the games. The games are great. It's like the exact aesthetic that I want out of something that's fantasy.
Are there 2 games right now?
3.
3, okay.
They've been coming out for a long time. I think the first game came out in 2005. And then the second game came out in 2012, 2011, and then the third game came out in 2016, I think. Earlier than that. Maybe the third game came out like in 2014. I think I don't know. It's been out for a little while.
You beaten them or?
I never, because I didn't play them as they came out.
Oh, okay.
By the time that I decided to play the first game, it was just so dated that I couldn't get behind it because it's just like old game design thought behind how mechanics. Mechanics work and blah blah blah. And so I just watched like a 3-hour YouTube video on the story.
Okay, that's what I was gonna ask after.
And then I started playing the second game, and that was more palatable because it was more modern. But I was so ready to get to the third game that I was like, I'm not going to finish the second game. So then I watched like a 4-hour YouTube video on the story of it. And then I've been playing the third game for like 4 years because it's just so massive that like I get intimidated.
Yeah.
And I want to be like paying attention like 100% while I play it. So I know that I can't be listening to podcasts while I play it. And then I'm like, but I need to catch up on podcasts. And so then, I don't prioritize the things that I want to do very well.
Yeah, and that was I know we already said it, but that was a thing coming into this movie that I was a little nervous about, just because we all split our time so much, even while we're doing certain things. Like I always say, I'm usually working while I listen to the books, so it's rare for me to do something like in English and a movie like forced to sit in one spot, like out of my home too.
It's really hard for me to watch movies because of that, because I think, man, I'm going to do one thing over the course of 2 hours when I could do, which it makes no sense. It's just stupid numbers in my head, but I'd be like, or I could watch 6 episodes of anime in that time, and I've done 6 things.
And I've done
when really I've only done one thing, sit in front of the TV. But it's all about what you interpret everything as.
Yeah. And it's, we talk about
hopefully what it sort of is like what may have been like a selfish part of why I proposed we read the Witcher series is that I hope that it kind of galvanizes my drive to finish the fucking game.
Yeah, that
I'll be like reading and I'll be like, oh my God, I should fucking play this game. And then I'll fucking do it finally.
Are they making another one, you think?
If they do, it's not going to be for a very long time. Their current project is Cyberpunk 2077, which comes out sometime next year. And then whatever support they have for that in the couple of years post that. So I don't think that they have any intention of returning to The Witcher for a very long time.
Okay. Well, that sounds like a fun new universe, though. Like a future world, just with people taking full creative license. That's always fun.
Yeah.
Like when... in Parks and Rec, they did a time skip for like 4 years or something, and then they had these like clear iPads, that were just like, well, that's fun, right. Just like, but so this is a good one too. I think I feel it.
Yeah, I'm excited. So, get that book, Blood of Elves, the first of the Witcher series. Read the first 3 chapters. Read the prequels if you want as well. And we'll see y'all next week with that. I'm Will Hedrick.
I'm Jordan Schaffer.
And this is Dog Ears and Timestamps.